Hello all, my name is Darrell Broscomb and I've been a marine engineer and a coded welder working on the UK's inland waterways for 20 odd years. I entered the trade as an experienced static plant fitter and a coded welder from the aggregate industry. When I first left school, I did an apprenticeship as a mechanic in a Citroen garage where we also restored classic vehicles. Here, I started learning my mechanical skills and how to weld. I recently finished the IIMS diploma in yacht and small craft marine surveying, and I plan to move away from the spanners and grinders and use my knowledge to survey inland waterways craft. Over the past few years at Tooley's Boatyard on the Oxford Canal, where I have been working as the marine engineer, we have been experiencing an increasing number of fuel-related breakdowns, with one particularly problematic issue being sticky diesel. Our diesel specialist, who services fuel injectors and ejector pumps, reports that they are gummed up with a dark, sticky substance. These breakdowns, and Mike, prompted me to write an article about sticky diesel, which has led on to this presentation. I will discuss what sticky diesel is, why it happens, what it does, and how to repair it, and also how to prevent it from occurring again. The problem is here, we're over my notes. But, what is sticky diesel? Sticky diesel is a problem that occurs when a sticky, tar-like substance accumulates on the fuel system's internal components. This sticky substance affects the entire fuel system, including filters, lift pumps, injection pumps, and injectors. It can cause the moving parts within the system to seize solid. Replacing these issues is expensive for customers, and seized components have caused severe engine damage. Researching these issues, I have discovered that sticky diesel is not only affecting boats on the inland waterways, it has also been causing issues with sea-going motorboats and yachts. While a breakdown on the Oxford Canal when passing through Banbury may be a little inconvenient, a breakdown at sea could potentially be very dangerous. I've also discovered that farmers have been experiencing similar issues with sticky diesel, which is causing their equipment to break down. Since agriculture is obviously an important industry, in-depth testing has been conducted to try and find the cause of the issue. I'm a welder and a mechanic, not a scientist, so I won't delve too deeply into the technicalities of the subject, but the fuel from broken down farming equipment that was sent for testing appeared to be okay, other than the slightly higher than usual solids being noted. These solids, which were confirmed to be from the biofuel that is added to our diesel, are the result of the biofuel separating from the fossil fuel and solidifying in cold weather. They're a waxy, soapy substance that can build up and block fuel filters. Unfortunately, when the weather warms up again, the solids don't dissolve back into the fuel, but they remain as separated solids floating around the fuel system. The mixing of biofuels with fossil fuel was introduced to reduce our carbon footprint and meet global carbon reducing targets. Over the past 2 decades, this has caused various problems, as the two fuel types are completely incompatible. Biofuels are hygroscopic, meaning they absorb water, and water does not blend with fossil fuel oil, or indeed any oil. The biofuel used in the UK, B7 diesel, isn't FAME, which is manufactured from fats. It was not the best option, but it was the cheapest, and unfortunately, as is often the case, maximum profits are given priority over sensible choices. There are plans to increase the percentage of biofuels in our fuel over the coming years, and this will likely increase our problems further. On top of the FAME issue, the fuel samples also discovered leftovers from the refining process. Modern fuels demand a low sulfur content requirements, and they rely on scavenger additives to remove sulfur during the refining process. These scavengers are intended to be removed from the fuel once they've absorbed the sulfur, but traces of them sometimes remain. One of these is MEA triazine, and testing has found this particular scavenger in sticky diesel fuel samples. Here, brown deposits can be seen on a fuel filter taken off an engine with sticky diesel issues. The colour is similar to the scavenger used in the refining process. The biofuel, FAMES, soapy byproducts caused by the cold, mixed with this leftover refining scavenger and make an excellent injector glue. The quality of our fuel, regardless of the biofuel content, is different from what it used to be. Oil companies were refining 80% more per barrel than in the 1980s. They claim that on average, fuel produced is used within 18 to 24 days. Stability additives are added to enable the fuel to perform satisfactorily for 6 months maximum, as long as it is stored in ideal conditions. Marine is far from ideal, so degradation will occur earlier. So what does sticky diesel do to the fuel system? On a modern diesel engine, the fuel in the tank continuously circulates the fuel system, lubricating and cooling the moving components. If the conditions are right, sticky diesel deposits are spread around the system. After passing through the fuel filter or water trap, the diesel finds the fuel lift pump. The first time I saw sticky diesel, I intended a breakdown and diagnosed the lift pump had failed. You have a diaphragm and a pair of one-way valves inside a lift pump. The pump works by a cam inside the engine, pumping the diaphragm and pushing diesel through the valve. The one-way valve functions, preventing the diesel from returning, and thus a vacuum is creating, pulling fresh fuel from the tank, and the process continues. I stripped the lift pump down for rebuilding, suspecting a torn diaphragm. It became apparent that the one-way valves that make the pump work had been glued shut by a dark sticky substance, the colour of Marmite. These valves are factory pressed in and are not replaceable parts, so I replaced the whole pump assembly. I didn't think much of it, other than wondering if someone had used some contaminated fuel in the past. This was probably 10 years ago, and the cases of sticky diesel have been slowly increasing ever since. Some fuel filter housings have a plunger fitted to the top to assist with bleeding the system when changing filters. These function with the same way that the valves in a lift pump and are prone to blocking with sticky diesel. Again, these are not a serviceable part and will require replacement. Next in line are the fuel filters. The contaminated fuel coats all internal surfaces of the fuel system with a varnish-like film, which builds up into a thick layer and then peels off. The fuel filters, doing their job, collect this from the fuel, and it eventually hinders the fuel flow. Here is a CAV type fuel filter that has collected a large amount of waxy debris from the fuel. This particular filter is more of a biofuel issue than a sticky diesel one. I've had much better examples of sticky diesel deposits on fuel filters, but unfortunately, I didn't take any pictures. I must remember to take more pictures. When sticky diesel is present, it is like the filter has been varnished and then soaked in a paint stripper, causing it to peel off and block the filter, hindering the fuel flow. It's fine. Next in the system is the fuel injection pump. The sticky diesel will cause fuel injection pumps to fail. This fuel injection pump is from a Kubota engine, which is commonly used in narrowboats. Beaters and nannies, as well as other manufacturers, are based on Kubota diesel engines. An engine-driven cam below the injector pump pushes the individual pumps, sending diesel to the injectors at the correct time and pressure. This is a pump body here. There are many parts, and it's quite expensive to get them rebuilt. Add to that the cost of an engineer removing and refitting them, and the bill is easily over £1,000. Andy Reeves, the owner of the yacht which this injection pump came from, wrote an article for Yachting Monthly after he had a sticky diesel breakdown. After being moored up for an explore while sailing near the Isle of Scilly, the engine would not restart, and they ended up having to sail back to Cardiff in less than ideal conditions. Once back and investigating the non-starting engine, it was discovered that the timing had slipped and the pistons had hit the valves and bent them. Andy had the head rebuilt and refitted it, but the engine would still not start. He diagnosed it as the fuel injection pump. Upon servicing the pump, a shocking discovery was made. The internal shaft, which is this shaft here, had snapped, leading to engine failure. Even though Andy did his own engineering, which saved the cost of employing a mechanic, this was a very expensive repair. Next, we have the fuel injectors, and these are infected more than any other component. Modern fuel injectors work by the fuel from the injection pump creating enough pressure to open the injection needle, which then injects diesel into the combustion chamber. Sticky diesel coats the injection needle, causing it to seize, often partly open, allowing fuel to drip into the cylinder, causing excessive smoking. This diagram shows the needle quite well. This is the needle, and the fuel travels down this chamber here, and when there's enough pressure, it lifts the needle and injects diesel into the combustion chamber. These are very fine tolerances, and it doesn't take much sticky diesel, and they jam and block up. If the vessel has had sticky diesel, the fuel in the tanks will definitely need cleaning out. This boat had such a bad case that I had to cut into the tank to clean it out. Sticky diesel isn't diesel bug. A diesel bug is caused by water sitting in the bottom of the tank and bacteria growing there. There was no water in this tank. The sides looked like they'd been varnished, and the varnish was peeling off. And you can see where I've been scraping the side walls in this picture. I just used a paint scraper and it just peeled off and collected in the bottom of the tank. This is the inside of Andy's, who we discussed earlier, fuel tank. It was like a layer of paint had been applied to the inside. Andy had to dispose of 800 litres of diesel and cut access hatches into his two 500-litre steel fuel tanks in his 43-foot Bruce Roberts Mauritius yacht to enable him to clean them out properly. Andy's very keen for me to show the images in his experience, as he would like to spread word about this very expensive breakdown he had. That's about all of the components covered. The only other thing I have noticed is that every engine that had a sticky diesel required replacement fuel hoses. The rubber becomes soft and disintegrates. I'm going to play a short video of a boat that had ongoing problems. Looking at that video, you can imagine the different diagnostic opinions we had with this boat. Bent conrod, head gasket gone, endless ideas on what was wrong with it. And it's really hard to diagnose what's happening with an engine when the customer says it smokes or it vibrates or it keeps stalling. Mechanics is like fault finding. You change or rebuild a component and hope it cures the problem. Sometimes you can replace lots of parts before you cure any issues. If you suffered from sticky diesel, the only repair is a complete overhaul of the fuel system. This involves removing and getting serviced the injector pump and the injectors, replacing the lift pump. They're relatively cheap and really not worth messing around with. Cleaning out the fuel tank. This sometimes involves gaining access. Thoroughly clean the filter housings and replace the filters. Plunger type filter housing heads will need replacing. Replacement of all the rubber fuel hoses, and definitely replacing the fuel. It's a nasty expense that customers can't understand, and it can also involve a disposal charge. I've been lucky in giving it to a friend to heat his workshop. After all this has been completed, I run the engines from a fuel can with a 50-50 mix of diesel and injector cleaner to flush out any residue before reinstating the fuel tank. I'll play this video. This is the boat after it had all this work done. So on that engine, we had the injectors serviced and the bad smoking and running improved significantly. It wasn't running perfectly, but for an old engine, we felt it was okay. We sent the customer away, and a week later, the customer was back on the phone. The issue had returned. We gave the whole fuel system an overhaul, replacing hoses, changing filters, and we got the injectors serviced again. After that, the engine ran even better, and we hoped that was it. A week later, yes, back on the phone, the issues had returned. I said, "You're going to have to change your fuel." The customer disagreed and argued the case, not believing that fuel could go off. Eventually, he did agree to empty over 300 litres of fuel and replace it with fresh. At the same time, the tank was cut into and thoroughly cleaned out. This was 4 months ago, and all has been well ever since. Jeff once said to me, "There is no substitute for fresh fuel," and he's right. If the fuel had been fresh, none of this would have happened. So modern fuel issues. Let's briefly look in closer detail. We've got oxidative degradation. From the minute diesel is manufactured, it's decaying. Manufacturers consider 6 months maximum for storage. Some boats have fuel in which could potentially be 10 years old. Thermal degradation. As much as 50% of fuel flowing from the tank to the engine is used to cool the injectors and returns to the tank. Just one molecule of diesel, subjected to all that heat and pressure, can make that journey many times before being injected and combusted. Diesel fuel lacks additives for thermal stability, such as cooking oils, and thermal degradation can and will occur. Acidic degradation. The free water, the water that separates and sits in the bottom of a fuel tank, creates an acidic layer in the interface between the water and the fuel above, accelerating degradation. Incompatibility. This is new to me. Fuel should not be mixed. It can cause massive problems. Some of you will know that mixing fuel is a big no-no in the shipping industry. I think most boats have their tank topped up from different suppliers quite regularly. Biofuels, FAME. This stuff is behind many of our problems. It's hygroscopic, meaning it absorbs water from the atmosphere, separates and forms solids that block fuel systems, and environmentally, well, it's made out of palm oil. Contaminants such as dust, dirt, and rust speak for themselves, and it all ends up in the bottom of the fuel tank. Water. This is the biggest problem causer. Fortunately, it's easy to deal with. Just open the drain plug and let it out regularly. Fit a water trap filter. Install a fuel polisher. Asphaltenes. If you've had black smear in the bottom of your tank or black bits in the filter bowl, likely as anything, it's asphaltenes. Asphaltenes are hard and sticky, unlike diesel bug, which is soft and slimy. Sticky diesel, you don't want this. And diesel bug, soft, slimy, and it can only exist in your tank if you have water present. So what can we do to prevent expensive or even life-threatening breakdowns in our marine engines? We've got storage. How long do we keep our fuel? Fuel companies aren't designing fuel to be stored for any length of time. They're refining a higher percentage of oil per barrel, and the quality is definitely different than it used to be. Perhaps we should consider buying a more premium fuel. We used to keep our tanks full to prevent condensation. Should we now keep them empty if we're not using our boats? The fuel tanks themselves. We need a suitable means of draining. If access is a problem, possibly a pumped drain. Good size access panels to enable cleaning. Perhaps smaller tanks will be better. I'm not used to seagoing vessels, but 1,000 litres seems like a lot of fuel to me. And is it really necessary? Material of construction. With the water content of biofuels, mild steel that rusts may not be a good option. Fuel polishing. The testing that was done has shown that biofuel particles that separate from the fuel are bigger than 2 microns. Polishing can remove larger particles, as well as debris and water, and is a good preventative measure for maintaining stored fuel. We haven't tried this on any contaminated fuel, as no one wants to try it in an engine that has just had an expensive repair. I've made a small polishing system for my own boat with parts from eBay, and it was a fairly cheap system to build. Treatments. There are many fuel additives and treatments available. Honestly, I'm really not a fan of adding anything to fuel. Even with diesel bug issues, good husbandry, a clean tank, and fresh fuel equals a happy engine. Beware, Fuel retailers are worried about their store fuel going off, so they're adding treatments. Sellers add treatments, refineries add stabilizers, and customers are adding even more. It seems like a lot of extra stuff is getting mixed together that might not even be compatible. There is another form of biofuel available called HVO. The IWA, Inland Waterways Association, are promoting it, and many boaters have started using it. It is apparently a much cleaner fuel, and time will tell if there are any issues. Biofuel and HVO are derived from the food industry's oils and fats, including a significant portion of palm oil. Palm oil poses a serious threat to the rainforests and raises environmental concerns. The development of alternative engines or fuels seems to be very slow to me. So far, we have HVO, hydrogen, electric, all of which seem to have their problems. Are we going to head back to sails? From what I can tell, sticky diesel only happens to red diesel. Whether that's because road fuel is used quicker or red diesel is inferior, I've no idea. I've asked several mechanic friends in the motor trade, from cars to large commercial vehicles, and they've had no problems like this with road-going vehicles. Other than lift pumps, most of our problems are on modern engines. Listers, Kelvins, and BMCs, for example, seem quite happy to run on anything. The tolerances on modern injection pumps and injectors are much tighter than on older engines. I hope this has been useful to some of you and gives you an insight on new ways of dealing with fuel and storage. Is time running out for the internal combustion engine? Are we going to witness a slow and painful death? There we go.